News traveled fast in the Allied systems. Ships carried stories from station to station. Traders talked. Soldiers gossiped. Scientists shared data. Within 2 weeks of Danny Cole's rescue, his story had spread across the entire quadrant. The human who survived 3 cycles in hard vacuum. The cargo hauler who refused to die. The man who woke up from the impossible and asked for coffee. People wanted to know more. They wanted to understand. They wanted to see for themselves. The first official visitor arrived on a cold morning, 3 weeks after Danny's rescue. Her name was Commander Sethes, and she represented the Galactic Science Council. She was a Valaxian, tall and sharp-featured, with silver skin that reflected the light like polished metal. Her species was known for their intelligence and their complete lack of patience for things they did not understand. Danny Cole was a thing she did not understand. "I have reviewed your case file," Sethes said, sitting across from Danny in one of the station's meeting rooms. Her voice was flat and precise. "I have consulted with 17 different specialists across 9 different species. None of them can explain how you survived." Danny shifted in his chair. He was dressed in simple clothes now, no longer wearing the medical gown he had been given when he arrived. He looked healthy, normal, like a man who had not been clinically dead for 3 days. "I don't really understand it either," he said. "I just did." "That is not an acceptable answer. It's the only one I've got." Sethes leaned forward. Her eyes were narrow and intense. "You survived in hard vacuum for approximately 47 standard minutes before rescue arrived. Your species cannot survive more than 15 seconds in such conditions without protection. Your blood should have boiled. Your lungs should have exploded. Your brain should have died from lack of oxygen within minutes." Danny rubbed the back of his neck. "Yeah, I've heard all that. Several times now." "Then explain it to me." "I can't." He spread his hands. "I don't have a secret. I don't have a trick. I was out there, I was dying, and I just decided not to. I held on. I kept breathing, even when there wasn't any air. I kept my heart beating, even when it should have stopped. I just kept going. That is not physiologically possible. And yet, here I am." The interviews continued for days. Commander Sethes was not the only one who came. Military officers arrived to ask questions about his survival tactics. Researchers came to study his recovery. Historians showed up to record his story for the archives. Even a few journalists managed to get past station security, hoping to get an exclusive interview with the miracle man. Danny handled all of them the same way. He answered their questions honestly. He did not try to make himself sound special or heroic. He did not claim to have any secret knowledge or hidden abilities. He just told them what happened, over and over, in the same simple words. He was in the wreck. He was dying. He decided not to die. He waited for help. Help came. That was it. That was the whole story. The scientists did not like this answer. They wanted data. They wanted measurements. They wanted something they could study and analyze and publish papers about. Danny's story gave them nothing useful. It was just a man who survived when he should not have. They tested everything they could think of. They measured his brain activity when he was stressed. They recorded his heart rate during exercise. They analyzed his blood chemistry and his hormone levels and his genetic makeup. They put him in simulations of extreme environments and watched how his body responded. The results were confusing. In some ways, Danny was completely normal. His genetics were standard human. His biology followed all the expected patterns. There was nothing in his body that suggested he should be able to survive what he had survived. But in other ways, he was different. His pain tolerance was higher than average. His body recovered from stress faster than expected. His mind stayed calm in situations that would have made most people panic. These were small differences, not dramatic mutations or superhuman abilities. Just little things that added up. It is like his body does not know when to quit, one researcher told Vethel after weeks of testing. Most organisms have built-in limits. When damage reaches a certain level, the body shuts down to protect itself. His body does not seem to have that limit. Or if it does, he has found a way to ignore it. How is that possible? I do not know. I do not think anyone knows. One evening, after a long day of tests and interviews, Vethel found Danny alone in his room. He was sitting by the window, staring out at the stars. His face was tired, not from physical exhaustion, but from something deeper. The endless questions were wearing on him. "May I ask you something personal?" she said, standing in the doorway. Danny glanced over at her. "Sure, Doc." At this point, everyone else has. She walked into the room and sat down in the chair across from him. "When you were out there in the wreckage, with your ship destroyed and no hope of rescue, what were you thinking?" Danny was quiet for a long time. His eyes stayed on the stars outside the window. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer than usual. "I was thinking about my kid's sister. Her name is Lucy. She's back on Earth, finishing school, going to be a teacher." He smiled, just a little. "I promised I'd be there for her graduation next spring. Told her nothing would stop me." "You were thinking about her?" "Yeah. When everything was going dark and cold, and I could feel my body starting to shut down. I thought about Lucy. I thought about the promise I made, and I just couldn't let myself break it." He looked at Vethel. Dying wasn't an option. So I didn't. Vethel did not know how to respond to that. It was not a medical explanation. It was not science. It was just a man who loved his sister and refused to leave her alone. "That should not have been enough," she said finally. "Maybe not." Danny turned back to the window. "But it was all I had, so I made it enough." They sat in silence for a while, watching the ships drift past the station. Somewhere out there, millions of people were going about their lives. Working, traveling, living. None of them knew about the man in this small room who had done the impossible simply because he had someone to come home to. "The Science Council wants more tests," Vethel said eventually. "They want to study you for months, maybe years." Danny nodded slowly. "I figured. I'm like a puzzle they can't solve." "Will you agree to it?" He thought about it. Then he shook his head. "No, I'll give them another week or two. Let them finish what they're working on. But then I'm leaving. I've got a graduation to get to." Vethel wanted to argue. She wanted to tell him how important his case was, how much they could learn from studying him, how many lives might be saved if they could understand what made him different. But looking at him, she could not bring herself to say any of it. He had already given them everything he had. He had survived the unsurvivable. He had answered every question. He had let them poke and prod and test him for weeks. Now he just wanted to go home. And somehow, she could not blame him for that. The rescue shuttle moved slowly through the debris field. Broken metal floated everywhere. Pieces of a ship drifted in the cold darkness of space. Dr. Vethel stood at the observation window and watched the wreckage pass by. She had seen many terrible things in her career as a Galactic Medical Corps physician. She had treated soldiers after battles. She had helped survivors of crashed ships. But she had never seen destruction like this. The ship had been torn completely in half. The front section was gone, scattered into pieces too small to track. The back section was still mostly whole, but it was dark and cold. No lights, no power, no life support. The temperature readings showed -40 degrees inside the wreck. No one could survive in those conditions. Not without a suit. Not without heat. Not without air. Vethel had 4 arms and scales the color of deep ocean water. Her species, the Soluxians, were known for their calm nature and their skill in medicine. She had been a doctor for 30 years. She knew what death looked like. She knew the limits of biology. Every species had limits. Every body had a breaking point. The distress beacon had been active for 3 standard cycles before they arrived. 3 cycles. That was far too long. Whoever had sent that signal was certainly dead by now. "Scanning for life signs," said the pilot, a young officer named Kel. His voice was flat. He did not expect to find anything. Bethel did not expect anything either. This was a recovery mission now. They would collect whatever remains they could find and return them to the family. That was the best they could hope for. The scanner beeped. Kel leaned forward in his seat. He tapped the screen. He tapped it again. Then he turned to look at Bethel with wide eyes. "Doctor," he said, "I am reading a life sign." Bethel moved to the console. She looked at the data herself. The scanner showed 1 heartbeat. Slow but steady. Body temperature dangerously low, but still present. Brain activity weak but real. "That is impossible," she said. "I know. Run the scan again." Kel ran the scan 3 more times. Each time, the result was the same. There was someone alive in that wreckage. Someone who had survived 3 cycles in hard vacuum with no protection. They found him sitting on a chunk of twisted metal near what used to be the cargo hold. His legs were hanging over the edge, dangling above the endless black of space. He was wearing simple work clothes. No suit, no helmet, no oxygen tank. Just a thick jacket and warm boots. He was humming a song. Bethel watched through the shuttle window as the rescue team approached him. She expected him to be confused. She expected him to be unconscious or barely alive. She expected him to need immediate emergency care. Instead, the human looked up at the rescue team and waved. His name was Danny Cole. He was 34 years old. He worked as a cargo hauler for a small shipping company in the outer colonies. His ship was called the Rusty Nail. It had been hauling machine parts from a mining station to a colony world when it hit an uncharted asteroid. The collision had been instant and violent. The ship had broken apart in seconds. Danny remembered the impact. He remembered the sound of metal screaming. He remembered being thrown across the cargo hold and hitting the wall hard. He remembered the air rushing out of the breach in the hull. He remembered the cold coming in dot after that. Things got fuzzy. When they brought him aboard the shuttle, Bethel ran every test she could think of. His body temperature was 20 degrees below normal. His heart rate was dangerously slow. 3 of his ribs were fractured. His left lung had collapsed. He had severe frostbite on his fingers, his toes, his ears, and his nose. His blood oxygen level was so low that his brain should have stopped working hours ago. By every measurement, by every standard of medical science, Danny Cole should have been dead. Not injured, not unconscious, dead for at least 2 full cycles. Yet he was awake. He was alert. He was looking around the medical bay with curious eyes. "Hey, Doc," he said. His voice was rough and weak, but his words were clear. "Any chance you folks got coffee on this thing?" Al stared at him. She had seen many strange things in her career. She had treated species from across the galaxy. She had dealt with unusual biology and unexpected survival stories. But this was different. This was not unusual. This was impossible. "You are in critical condition," she told him. "Your lung has collapsed. Your organs are showing signs of hypothermic shock. You have been exposed to hard vacuum for approximately 47 minutes without protection. Your species cannot survive such exposure for more than 15 seconds. Danny seemed to think about this. Then he shrugged and immediately winced from the pain in his ribs. "Yeah," he said. "That sounds about right. So, coffee?" Beth-Al did not know what to say. She had no frame of reference for this situation. Her training had not prepared her for a patient who should be dead asking for a hot beverage. "I do not understand," she said finally. "How are you alive?" Danny looked at her. His eyes were tired but steady. There was no confusion in them, no panic, just a calm acceptance of his situation that made no sense given what he had just survived. "Honestly, Doc, I have no idea." He tried to sit up, then thought better of it. "One minute I was floating in the wreck, freezing my tail off, thinking about how much this was going to hurt. The next minute, your people were pulling me out." He paused. "How long was I out there?" "3 cycles. Approximately 72 of your Earth hours." Danny let out a low whistle. "No kidding. Felt like maybe an hour or 2. He looked down at his hands. The skin was discolored from the frostbite, patches of white and gray against his normal tan. I just kept telling myself to hold on. I just kept telling myself to hold on. Help was coming. Just had to wait a little longer. That should not have been possible. Yeah, well, Danny smiled. It was a tired smile, but there was something else in it. Something that Bethel could not quite identify. "I'm a stubborn guy." They brought him to the medical station 3 hours later. Bethel stayed with him the entire trip, monitoring his vitals and adjusting his treatment. His condition was stable, more than stable. Despite everything he had been through, his body was not shutting down. It was fighting back. She did not understand it. She was not sure she ever would. But as she watched Danny Cole drift into sleep, his damaged hands wrapped around a warm cup of the terrible synthetic coffee they kept in the shovel supply closet, she knew one thing for certain. She had just witnessed something that would change how she thought about humans forever. The Galactic Medical Station Orange 7 floated in orbit around a pale blue moon. It was one of the most advanced healing centers in the entire quadrant. The station had been built 40 years ago to serve diplomats, military officers, and important officials from across the Allied systems. It had the best equipment. It had the best doctors. It had the best everything. It was not designed for cargo haulers, who should have died in space. But Danny Cole had become something special. Not because he wanted to be. Not because he asked for it. Simply because he refused to die when the universe said he should. Dr. Bethel assigned him to the intensive recovery ward on the station's 3rd ring. The room was small but comfortable. It had a bed, a window that looked out at the stars, and enough medical equipment to monitor every function of his body. She expected him to sleep for days. She expected his recovery to be long and difficult. She expected complications. None of that happened. Within 6 hours of arriving at the station, Danny was awake and asking for food. Not the nutrient paste that patients usually received. Real food. He wanted eggs. He wanted toast. He wanted more coffee. The nursing staff did not know what to make of him. Neither did the other doctors. Word spread quickly through the station. By the end of the first day, everyone had heard about the human who survived 3 cycles in hard vacuum. By the end of the second day, researchers were requesting permission to study him. A Thalaxian biologist named Gren was the first to visit. Gren was tall and thin, with gray skin and large black eyes that never seemed to blink. He specialized in studying how different species responded to extreme environments. Danny Cole was the most extreme case he had ever encountered. "May I observe you?" Gren asked, standing at the foot of Danny's bed with a data tablet floating beside him. Danny was eating breakfast. Actual eggs, somehow acquired from the station's kitchen. He looked up at the alien scientist with a mouth full of food. "Sure," he said after swallowing. "Not much to see, though. Just a guy eating breakfast." Gren spent the entire morning watching Danny. He took notes on everything. How Danny chewed. How Danny breathed. How Danny's heart rate changed when he moved. It was strange and a little uncomfortable, but Danny did not seem to mind. He just kept eating and occasionally made small talk. Your cellular regeneration rate is unusual, Gren said after several hours. Your body is repairing tissue damage at 3 times the expected rate for your species. Danny poured himself more coffee from a pot the nurses had brought him. I heal fast. Always have. Broke my arm when I was 12. Doctor said it would take 8 weeks to fix. Took 4. That is not normal. Never said it was. The tests continued. More scientists came. More doctors. More curious observers who just wanted to see the human who should be dead. Danny handled all of them with the same calm patience. He answered their questions. He let them take samples of his blood, his skin, his bone marrow. He did not complain, even when the tests were uncomfortable. By the end of the first week, his collapsed lung had fully healed. The doctors had expected it to take at least 3 weeks with the best treatment. Danny did it in 7 days. His ribs were mending too. The fractures were closing faster than anyone thought possible. The frostbite damage was fading. The dead skin on his fingers and toes was being replaced by new, healthy tissue. It was like watching a wound heal in fast motion. I do not understand this, Bethel said one evening. She was sitting in Danny's room, reviewing his latest scan results on her tablet. Your body should not be capable of this. Danny was doing laps around the ward, walking in slow circles to keep his muscles from getting weak. He was not supposed to be walking at all. His doctors had told him to stay in bed for at least another week. He had ignored them. Bodies are weird, he said, not stopping his slow pace around the room. Mine more than most, I guess. That is not an explanation. No, it's not. He stopped at the window and looked out at the stars. I don't have an explanation, Doc. I never have. When I was a kid, I got sick a lot. Bad fevers, infections. The doctors kept saying I wouldn't make it past 10. Then past 15. Then past 20. He turned to look at her. I'm 34 now. Still here. Bethel set down her tablet. Your medical records from Earth show nothing unusual. Standard human biology. No genetic modifications. No special treatments. That's because there's nothing to show. I'm just stubborn. That's the only word for it. She wanted to argue with him. She wanted to tell him that stubbornness was not a medical condition. That willpower could not heal a collapsed lung. That determination could not regenerate damaged tissue. But the evidence was right in front of her. Danny Cole was healing. Faster than he should. Faster than anyone should. Meanwhile, Danny had made himself at home in the station. He had charmed the nursing staff with bad jokes and genuine kindness. He had taught a young orderly named Pox how to play poker, a card game from Earth that involved lying to your opponents about what cards you held. He had somehow convinced the cafeteria to start stocking real Earth coffee instead of the synthetic paste that most patients had to drink. He is very likable, Pox said to Bethel one afternoon. Pox was a Mallory, a small species with soft brown fur and large ears. He had been assigned to help with Danny's care and had quickly become something like a friend to the human. He is supposed to be resting, Bethel replied. Not teaching card games and reorganizing the cafeteria menu. The humans have a saying, Pox said. What doesn't kill them makes them stronger. That is absurd. Yes, Pox agreed. And yet, Bethel could not argue with that. She had spent her entire career believing in the limits of biology. Every species had boundaries. Every body could only take so much damage before it failed. That was science. That was fact. But Danny Cole did not seem to care about facts. He did not seem to care about limits. He just kept going, one day at a time, getting stronger when he should have been getting weaker. By the end of the second week, he was walking without support. By the end of the third week, he was exercising, doing push-ups in his room, stretching his healing muscles. testing his recovering body. The doctors watched and took notes and tried to understand. They failed. Danny just smiled and asked for more coffee. "You know," he said to Vethel one morning, "I've been thinking about what happened out there in the wreck." She looked up from her tablet. "Yes, I remember being cold. Really cold. Colder than I've ever been in my life. And I remember thinking that this was it. This was how I was going to die. Alone, in the dark, freezing to death in a broken ship." "But you did not die." "No." He was quiet for a moment. "Because I decided not to. I know that sounds crazy. I know that's not how it works. But I just made a choice. I told myself I wasn't going to die out there. I had things to do. People waiting for me. And dying wasn't part of the plan." Vethel did not know what to say to that. It was not scientific. It was not logical. It was not anything she had been trained to understand. But looking at Danny Cole, alive and healing and asking for his fourth cup of coffee, she could not deny that something had happened out there in the wreckage, something that went beyond medicine, beyond biology, beyond anything she knew. After 6 weeks of study, the Galactic Science Council finally released their official report on the Danny Cole incident. The document was long and complicated, filled with technical words and careful language. Researchers across the Allied systems downloaded it within hours of its release. Everyone wanted to know the answer. Everyone wanted to understand how a human had survived the impossible. The conclusion was simple. They had no idea. The report talked about human biology. It mentioned that humans had a higher pain tolerance than many other species. It noted that human bodies could enter a state of shock that sometimes protected vital organs during extreme trauma. It discussed how human immune systems were aggressive, sometimes to a fault, fighting back against damage, even when the fight seemed hopeless. But none of these things, alone or together, could explain what Danny Cole had done. The math did not work. The science did not add up. By every measurement and calculation, he should have died within minutes of his ship's destruction. He had survived for 3 days. The best the report could offer was a theory. Just an idea, really. Not proven. Not tested. Just a guess based on observation and frustration. The theory was this. Humans were too stubborn to die when they should not. It was not a popular conclusion. Many scientists criticized the report. They said it was vague. They said it was unscientific. They said it was too close to mysticism and superstition. Science dealt in facts and data and measurable things. Stubbornness was not measurable. Willpower could not be put in a test tube. But the theory spread anyway. Traders carried it from station to station. Travelers shared it over drinks in busy spaceports. Soldiers repeated it to each other during long watches. Within months, Danny Cole had become a legend. The human who refused to die. Danny hated it. "I'm just a guy who hauls cargo," he told Pox one afternoon. The young orderly had become his closest friend during his long stay at the station. They were sitting in the cafeteria, drinking coffee and watching ships arrive through the large observation windows. "I'm not a hero. I'm not some kind of super soldier. I just didn't want to die. Same as anyone else." Pox stirred his own drink, a sweet tea from his homeworld. "But you didn't die. That is the difference. Plenty of people don't die. Not like you. Not when they should." Danny stared into his coffee cup. The dark liquid reflected the lights overhead like a tiny black mirror. "I don't know what to tell people. They want some big secret. Some special trick. They want me to be different in a way they can understand and copy. But there's nothing. I'm just me." "Maybe that is the point," Pox said. "Maybe there is nothing special about you. Maybe any human could have done what you did." Danny looked up. "What do you mean?" "I've been thinking about this for weeks. Pox set down his cup and leaned forward on his small arms. The Science Council says you survived because of stubbornness. They mean it as a criticism. They think it is a weak explanation. But maybe they are wrong. Maybe stubbornness is the most powerful thing there is. That doesn't make sense, does it not? Pox tilted his head, his large ears twitching. Every species has biological limits. When those limits are reached, the body gives up. It stops fighting. It accepts death. This is natural. This is normal. This is how evolution works. He paused. But what if a species evolved to not accept limits? What if stubbornness was built into their very nature? What if they simply refused to give up, no matter what? Danny was quiet for a long moment. He had never thought about it that way before. He had always seen himself as ordinary. Just a normal guy from Earth who got lucky. But maybe Pox was right. Maybe there was something different about humans. Not in their bodies. Not in their genes. In their minds. When I was out there, Danny said slowly, in the wreck, I could feel myself dying. I knew what was happening. My body was shutting down. Everything was getting dark and cold and quiet. It would have been easy to just let go, to stop fighting and let it happen. But you didn't. No, I got angry instead. Danny laughed softly, shaking his head. I remember being so mad. At the asteroid. At the ship. At the universe for putting me in that situation. And I remember thinking that I was not going to let some stupid rock in space be the end of me. I had too much left to do. Pax nodded slowly. You turned your fear into anger. Your despair into determination. I guess. I don't know if I did it on purpose. It just happened. Perhaps that is the secret. Not that humans are stronger than other species, but that you are better at lying to yourselves. At telling yourself that you can do something when all evidence says you cannot. Danny laughed again, louder this time. It was the first real laugh he had had in weeks. Yeah, maybe that's it. We're just really good at being delusional. It is a useful delusion. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching a large transport ship dock at the station. Hundreds of passengers began to file out, each one going about their ordinary lives. None of them knew about the conversation happening in this small corner of the cafeteria. None of them knew about the human who had cheated death through sheer stubbornness. I've been reading about your species, Pox said eventually. Your history. Your culture. Your stories. Oh yeah? Find anything interesting? Many things. Pox picked up his tea again. Your people have survived so much. Wars, diseases, natural disasters. Over and over, throughout your history, you have faced extinction. And over, you have refused to accept it. You kept fighting. You kept building. You kept going. Danny nodded. We're a stubborn species. More than that. You are a species that does not understand the word impossible. When you are told something cannot be done, you do it anyway. When you are shown your limits, you break them. When you are faced with death, you argue with it. And sometimes we win. Yes, Pox said, his voice soft with something like wonder. Sometimes you win. The afternoon light shifted through the observation windows, casting long shadows across the cafeteria floor. Danny finished his coffee and thought about what Pox had said. About stubbornness and limits and the strange power of refusing to give up Dodd. Maybe the Science Council was right. Maybe there was no scientific explanation for what he had done. Maybe it really was just stubbornness. Just a man who wanted to live badly enough to make it happen. But if that was true, then maybe it meant something bigger. Maybe it meant that the limits everyone talked about were not as real as they seemed. Maybe biology was not destiny. Maybe willpower actually mattered. Or maybe he was just lucky. Maybe he had somehow beaten the odds through pure chance, And all this talk about stubbornness was just a story people told to make sense of something senseless. Danny did not know which answer was right. He was not sure it mattered. All he knew was that he was alive when he should be dead. He was healing when he should be broken. And in 3 weeks, he was going to watch his sister graduate from school. Everything else was just details. 3 months after his rescue, Danny Cole was finally cleared to leave Orange 7. His injuries had healed completely. The frostbite scars on his hands and feet had faded to thin white lines that most people would never notice. His ribs were stronger than before. His lung worked perfectly. The doctors said he was in better shape now than he had been before the accident. They gave him a clean bill of health. They gave him a generous payment from the shipping company's insurance to cover the loss of his ship. They gave him a standing invitation to return for more tests and studies whenever he wished. Danny accepted the money. He politely refused the invitation. On his last day at the station, he woke up early and packed his few belongings into a small bag. The station had given him some clothes. Pox had found him a proper jacket. One of the nurses had tracked down an old book about Earth history that Danny had mentioned wanting to read. It was not much, but it was enough. He was going home. The hangar bay was quiet at this hour. Most of the passenger shuttles did not start running until later in the morning. But Danny had found a cargo ship heading toward the Earth colonies that was leaving early, and he had talked the captain into giving him a ride. Dr. Vethafo found him loading his bag onto the ship. She had not slept much the night before. She had spent hours reviewing his case file one last time, looking for something she might have missed. Some explanation. Some answer. She had found nothing. "You are really leaving," she said, walking across the hangar toward him. Danny turned and smiled when he saw her. "Got places to be. My sister's graduation is in 3 weeks. I promised I'd be there." Thou stopped a few feet away. She was not good at goodbyes. Her species did not place much importance on them. But this felt different. This felt like the end of something she would never fully understand. "I reviewed your file again last night," she said. "Every scan, every test, every piece of data we collected over the past 3 months. Find anything new?" "No. The mathematics still say you should be dead. By every measurement we have, you should not be standing here." Danny set his bag down and turned to face her properly. "The mathematics are probably right. Then how? How did you survive? How are you alive?" It was the same question she had asked 100 times. The same question every scientist and researcher and curious observer had asked. And Danny's answer was always the same. But this time, he paused. He looked at Vethawal for a long moment, studying her 4 arms and ocean blue scales and the confusion in her dark eyes. Then he smiled, and there was something in that smile that had not been there when they first pulled him from the wreckage. A kind of certainty, a quiet knowing. "I'll tell you what I think," he said. "I've had a lot of time to think about it. 3 months of being poked and tested and questioned. 3 months of trying to understand something that doesn't want to be understood. And what did you conclude? I think the universe has rules, laws, limits, things that say what should happen and what shouldn't. Science is about understanding those rules, predicting what comes next based on what came before." He paused. "But humans, we don't always listen to should. We listen to will. And sometimes, if you want something badly enough, if you refuse to accept any other outcome, the universe bends. Just a little. Just enough." Vethal blinked her 4 eyes. "That is not scientific. No, it's not. It is not logical. It is not supported by evidence. It is not anything I was taught in my training. I know. But you believe it." Danny nodded slowly. "I believe that I should be dead. I believe that everything you've told me is true. The math, the biology. the limits. But I also believe that I'm standing here, alive, about to go watch my sister graduate. And I believe that I made that happen. Not by being special. Not by being different. Just by wanting it enough. Vethal wanted to argue. She wanted to tell him that willpower could not change physics. That wanting something badly enough did not make it possible. That science dealt in facts, not feelings. But she had spent 3 months watching Danny Cole do the impossible. She had watched his body heal faster than it should. She had watched his mind stay calm when it should have broken. She had watched him smile and laugh, and make friends when he should have been traumatized and damaged and broken. Maybe science did not have all the answers. Maybe some things existed beyond measurement and calculation. Maybe humans had found something that other species had not. Some spark. Some fire. Some stubborn refusal to accept what the universe told them was true. Danny reached out his hand. Vethel looked at it for a moment, then remembered. An Earth custom. A sign of respect and farewell. She reached out with one of her 4 arms and took his hand in hers. His skin was warm. His grip was strong. "Thank you for saving my life," Danny said. "Even if I wasn't supposed to have one to save. I am not sure I saved anything. Your body saved itself. Your mind saved itself. I just watched. You were there. That's what matters." He let go of her hand and picked up his bag. The cargo ship behind him was starting to power up, its engines humming to life. It was time to go. "Will I see you again?" Vethel asked. Danny smiled. "Maybe. The universe is a big place. We might cross paths." He started up the loading ramp, then paused and looked back. "But if you ever need a cargo hauler who's too stubborn to die, you know where to find me." Then he was gone, disappearing into the ship. The ramp closed behind him. The engines roared. And a few minutes later, the cargo ship lifted off and flew out through the hangar doors, heading toward the distant Earth colonies. Vethal stood in the empty hangar for a long time, watching the stars where the ship had disappeared. She thought about everything she had learned. About humans, about survival, about the strange power of refusing to give up. 6 months later, she received a small package. It had traveled across the galaxy, passed from ship to ship, to finally reach her office at Orinth 7. Inside was a photograph. It showed Danny Cole standing next to a young woman in a graduation cap and gown. They were both smiling. The woman looked like Danny. Same brown eyes. Same stubborn set to the jaw. His sister, Lucy. On the back of the photograph, in messy handwriting, was a single line. "Made it. Thanks for the coffee." Vethel kept that photograph on her desk for the rest of her career. 40 more years of medicine. 40 more years of treating patients and studying biology and trying to understand the limits of what bodies could do. And whenever a colleague asked about the photograph, she would tell them the story. The human who survived 3 cycles in hard vacuum. The cargo hauler who refused to die. The man who woke up from the impossible and asked for coffee. Most of them did not believe her. They would smile politely and nod and assume she was exaggerating. The math was too clear. The science was too certain. What she described simply could not have happened. But that was all right. Vethal barely believed it herself. And yet, that was the thing about humans she had learned. They did not care about, and yet, they did not care about impossible or should not or cannot. They just kept going. One breath at a time. One heartbeat at a time. One stubborn refusal at a time. Until the universe gave up and let them win.